Live streaming once again on YouTube from the Association for Career and Technical Education CareerTech Vision 2022 event. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada. It has been just a phenomenal week so far. Tons and tons of people, as you've heard already today. More than 6,000 people here in attendance at CareerTech Vision. So many great things that are going on with ACTE. Hundreds upon hundreds of concurrent educational sessions for our career technical education teachers and educators. There's a massive career technology expo taking place, so people walking through this facility and seeing all kinds of cutting edge technology in a wide variety of technical education fields and learning from each other. That's what this is all about. Tons of presentations where educators are learning from other educators about how to bring even more best practices back into the classroom. We're going to talk about a ton of those best practices today. I am Matt Kirkner, your host for this episode and every episode of the Tech Ed Podcast, with somebody who's doing some really interesting things in the world of technical education and in regional leadership for ACTE. She comes to us in the form of Carrie Scheiderer. Carrie, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really cool title you have: Tech Prep Chief Administrator, Central Ohio Technical College, and huge involvement in ACTE Region 1 Vice President, if I understand correctly.
Yes.
So let's talk about, starting with your role at Central Ohio Technical College. I know you're all about building pathways. We hear that word all the time. How do we get more and more young people understanding the huge wide variety of opportunities that are available to them as they're leaving high school, whether they're going direct to workforce, they're choosing service in the military, going on to a community or technical college, four-year university, just an incredible array of opportunities for our young people that I think a lot of times they don't necessarily recognize all of these different pathways. So you're all about building pathways from secondary to post-secondary education. How have those pathways, particularly for career technical education focused students, evolved over the time that you've been in your position in education, Carrie?
Yeah, sure. I think we see those pathways develop and change as business and industry changes. So one thing about career technical education is we always try to listen to our advisory board members to really see what's in demand, and they change their curriculum based on what's in demand and what students need to be learning out in the field. So maybe something that was relevant, 5 years ago is no longer relevant, so the curriculum needs to be adjusted, and maybe the program needs to be updated based on the business and industry needs of that time period.
Absolutely. I serve on several advisory boards for community colleges in our area where I live in Wisconsin. And I was a manufacturing employer for 20-some years, and we had team members from all of our companies that served on those advisory boards. I posted on LinkedIn, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, and the statement was that if you're not serving on your local community college's advisory board, you have no business complaining about the skills gap or about the lack of skilled talent. To your point, these are the individuals that determine what curriculum is going to be delivered in the classroom, on what types of equipment, and really important, what are those emerging technologies that are taking place in all kinds of CTE fields. We talk here a lot about manufacturing and advanced manufacturing and industrial careers, but really across the board, these advancing technologies. And if you're not serving on that advisory board, if you are not actively participating with your community college, then don't talk about why you can't find people, because you're part of the problem. The other thing that I think people don't necessarily realize is that the people who get the best students coming out of those programs are the ones that are actively involved with their community colleges. And I'll tell a quick story. Several years ago, I was running a pretty decent-sized fabrication company in the Midwest. And I went to our local community college, spoke to all the welding students about the great careers that we had at our company, and I thought I did just a great job, patted myself on the back walking off the campus and going back to work. Waited a month or two, not a single student applied. And I went back to the teacher that invited me to the classroom, and I said, what's going on? What did I do wrong? And he literally started laughing. He's like, that is just the start. He's like, you need to have people on the advisory board. You need to bring pizza in on Fridays for the students. You need to be actively engaged with faculty and staff and really understanding what's going on at the college. He said those are the people that get the first pick of the talent. Is that the same thing that you see in Ohio?
Yeah, I think so. I think we see a lot of that. It's business and industry moves a little bit quicker probably than education does. But we also have to think that talent pipeline. And so, a lot of those aren't quick moving. We need to start even down in middle school talking
Right.
about careers and what's in demand in those areas and really building those pipelines for different in demand industries.
That's one of the things we talk a lot about on the Tech Ed podcast is the huge influence that whatever a student's interests or experiences are when they're in middle school and high school, the huge influence that that has in terms of what their career pathway is and what they decide to do. And there's a tremendous amount of data that would seem to support that it really is about those interests and experiences while they're in middle school and high school that drive our young people's decisions about what it is that they want to do after they complete their secondary education pathway. So let's talk now a little bit more about the evolving world of education. You know, as I sit through some of the presentations here at ACTE, as we learn more and more from all of our guests, we really are in a period of time for career technical education of rapid change, of people trying to figure out how to do things differently. We have, historically low levels of teaching talent in some cases, and so we're struggling sometimes to have the instructors and the teachers we need to deliver the learning. And we're also in a world where technology is changing so fast that lifelong learning is becoming really, really important. And so we talk a little bit here on the Tech Ed podcast about those on-ramps and off-ramps to post-secondary education. A lot of us went through some path where it was, all right, we went through high school and then we went to a community college, maybe we went to a 4-year university, maybe some folks got an advanced degree. That was a pretty scripted process. And even if you went direct to workforce, pretty scripted process. We're not in that age anymore where you can just earn a degree or earn a tech diploma and then be set for the next 30, 40, 50 years of your career. We really are in a world of continuing education. And so talk about those on-ramps and off-ramps in post-secondary education as you see it from your vantage point as a tech prep chief administrator at Central Ohio Technical College.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of that in Ohio and across the nation, but having things like certifications available, short-term certificates, things that we know students may not want to even commit to a 2 or 4 year degree. So how can we get them some training and get them out into the workforce? And then maybe they want to come back and finish one of those degrees. And a lot of the things that we look at in Ohio are not necessarily, what kind of degree you need, but what do you want to do when you grow
Right.
up, and what does that require to get you out into the career field quickly?
And once you're out into that career field, talk about the advantages or the opportunities available to working adults. I think a lot of times people don't realize that the average age in our technical and community colleges here in the United States, some might think, well, it's an 18 or 19-year-old student who's coming right out of high school. Not really the case. Is that right? So talk about the demographics of the students that you're serving, and then how you interact in the world of workforce training, of preparing that next generation of individuals who are already in the workforce for the changing careers.
Sure, yeah. In Ohio, we have a couple different models of adult education. So we have not only community colleges, we also have what are called adult ed programs out at our career centers, which are also a great opportunity for students. So I think as we look across the country, we see different models, and Ohio, I would say, has great opportunities for all different types of learners, but I do think we are seeing a lot of adults in the workforce. So maybe they're changing careers, or maybe what they did is no longer a career.
Right.
They have to reskill.
So to your point earlier with the changing role of education, the changing world of education, the emerging value of third-party credentials and certifications, which, I'll be honest, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago when I was running manufacturing companies, nobody was talking about those. Or if they were, the conversations were happening on the education side and usually around funding or grant requirements more so than, this changing world of work. What kind of feedback are you getting from employers as the whole idea of certification starts to emerge? Are they starting to value them in ways that maybe they didn't 5 or 10 years ago?
I think right now employers are really just looking for employees. It's not necessarily what kind of degree they have. They want an employee that will show up for work, will be they can be independent in getting there and being on time and all of those things that we think about. And then they're willing to go back and possibly pay for training.
Right.
So I think we're seeing a lot of that. It's not necessarily about what type of degree they have, but what they can do as far as coming to work and being a good employee.
Absolutely. One of the articles I read just at the very end of last week in the Wall Street Journal covered this whole idea of how employers are starting to change the expectations for employees. 4-year degrees still certainly important in certain industries and in certain areas. Advanced degrees important. Nobody wants to go see a doctor with a high school education where they ended their education pathway right after high school. There's still certain careers that require those 4-year degrees and advanced degrees. But more and more employers are waking up to the idea that it really is about having the right talent and the right competencies and the right work ethic, the right soft skills, if you will, of the employees that are joining the workforce and becoming a lot more flexible in terms of what they're expecting of their team members. I think we're going to see more and more of that as manufacturing continues to evolve, as we have more and more different opportunities for people to understand lifelong learning, e-learning, third-party certifications, maybe going back to a community college, a technical center after graduating from high school, and making sure that we continue to keep our skills sharp. That's going to be really, really important, and particularly in places like the Midwest, where we are seeing just tremendous investments now in the manufacturing world. I've followed from the outside looking in a little bit some of the things that are going on in Ohio. We've got a good friend in the form of a guy named Jeff Orovitz. He's been on the Tech Ed podcast before. He's now the vice chair of the Ohio Manufacturers Association, and he joined us to talk a little bit about some of these huge investments that Intel is making in the state of Ohio. So you're a strong manufacturing state to begin with. I didn't mention when we were getting to know each other a little bit, I actually acquired an Ohio company back in 2011. It was on the other end of the state in Piqua, Ohio, a little bit north of Dayton. Spent a lot of time in Ohio, just a huge background and history of manufacturing, but massive growth in your manufacturing sector, thanks in part to the projects like the new Intel facility that's being built around the integrated circuit, the IC market, the chip market. That's going to require a really, really high-skilled workforce. So from your expertise and your vantage point, Carrie, in building business, education, and community partnerships, what do you think it's going to take between these different stakeholders to ensure that Ohio has the skilled workforce it needs for the future?
Yeah, that Intel chip plant is actually very close to COTC, to Central Ohio Technical College.
Okay.
And some of the conversations that I think all of our education partners are having with them is, what do employees look like? What types of employees do you need? And I think that looks different. We look at secondary, post-secondary, adult ed training, and the model is different here. So they've had factories in different states.
Right.
But what we have to offer with education, one of the reasons why they came to Ohio was because of our education. So I think those conversations have already happened. One thing that I'm doing is helping some of our secondary career centers build pathways and programs that will then feed into to Intel.
It's going to be a really exciting opportunity to watch that advance. What you just said, it really speaks to the importance of career technical education, and you really do. When I was on the manufacturing side and we were opening up a new plant, the first thing that we would look at is what is the proximity of our customer base, right? Because we wanted to be located close to the point of consumption for all kinds of good reasons. But the second thing we would always look at is what is the quality, not just of the existing workforce, but the education infrastructure within that community to be able to produce the workforce that we would need for the future. And you're exactly right. I was involved in a number of the initiatives in southeast Wisconsin over the last several years with some of the larger employers that have relocated there or opened up new plants there. And that's always top of mind, is what is the quality of education and how are we going to create that next generation workforce. I want to go a little bit deeper on some of the partnerships between communities and businesses. You mentioned earlier in our discussion that education doesn't always work at the speed maybe that industry does. The line that I like to use, and some people roll their eyes at it, is that when I was in manufacturing, we could make a decision on Monday, implement it on Wednesday, and see the results of that decision on Friday. And let's face it, education doesn't always work at that same rate. And I think a lot of times manufacturers and industrial employers in general, when they're building a relationship with educators, they kind of come to it with, why can't you move as fast as we do in business? Well, the answer is that there's just tremendous, for better or for worse, bureaucracies, red tape, rules, regulations, requirements, approvals, all of these things that have to happen in the world of education. As you sit down and talk with business leaders in Central Ohio and talk about the future of education evolution, how you service their needs. How do you break down some of those barriers between the educators and the industrial employers to keep the lines of communication open and make sure that the discussions are positive?
Yeah, I think one thing that that I do directly within my position is helping to convene all the partners. What we see a lot of times is maybe business and industry have certain ideas and they think maybe education isn't moving fast enough. Education thinks workforce may be moving too quickly.
Sure.
But if you have someone that can convene those partners and have those discussions, it alleviates a lot of that, frustration between all parties.
Right.
We also have discussions with community partners as part of that, and students and parents, because a lot of those perceptions of some of those careers are changing as well as we don't think about dirty factories anymore
Right.
and things like that. They're very clean, but how do we change that perception? So I think just convening all those partners is very helpful.
Do you feel like we're making progress? I would say from my vantage point now, and I was in industry for 20 some odd years, been on the kind of education side now for about 7 or 8 years. I feel like there's been a pretty marked difference. We still have a long way to go, but in terms of the perception of manufacturing and advanced manufacturing careers, for instance, where we were maybe 2015 to where we are today, are you starting to sense that maybe parents who, historically have probably been a little bit of the challenge of getting people into advanced manufacturing careers, that they're starting to change their perception of manufacturing?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's been slower than maybe we've wanted. But as we, open their eyes to maybe the money that's in that
Right.
career field,
Right.
and maybe you need just a short-term certificate to get out there. And then a lot of what we do also is like business and industry tours with students,
Sure.
so they can actually see what that looks like while they're still in high school or even before.
Absolutely. One of the things that I like to reflect on is just as our kids, and they're now. I have a son who's both my kids are in their early 20s. One of them is still in school. The other one is off starting his career. But when people would say, "What do you want for your kids?" I would say two things. Number one is I want them to have a career that they enjoy, they feel like they're not going to work every day, that they're rewarded, that they feel valued, and that they like doing what they're doing for a living. And the second thing is that I don't want them coming back and living in my basement. And then maybe even in reverse order, right? First, you're not coming home and living in the basement. Second, you're going to have a career that you enjoy. But I think that's true for most parents, that if you ask a parent, what do you really want for your kid in terms of their future career, if they can have a career that can sustain whatever lifestyle it is that they want, and they have a career that they feel valued and they feel they're doing important work and they like what they're doing, you check those two boxes. I'm a big believer that we can reach the parents in many cases through their kids, through the types of experiences that you're talking about. That if we take a student to a brand new Intel facility where you can eat off the floor, where it's well lit, where there's all kinds of automation, mechatronics technology, as you and I are sitting here at ACTE looking across the aisle, seeing a smart sensors trainer that's teaching all this advanced manufacturing technology, mechatronics trainers, robotics. I mean, you look at the things that we're looking at right now, that is not your grandparents' manufacturing facility, right? That's the manufacturing facility of the future, and I think that part of it is really, really important. And then I think the other part of it is really helping employers and educators, to your point, speak each other's languages, be able to sit together. I have a good friend by the name of Mike Bigley, who is the superintendent of a large school district in western Wisconsin, who says the first thing that we needed to do was get everybody to check their agendas at the door. Educators may not understand manufacturing or industry. Industrial employers in many cases certainly don't understand education. But if we can acknowledge that, and we can understand that the two of those spaces don't necessarily, even though we may not play in the same space, we can understand each other if we open up lines of communication and talk. It's amazing what can be done. Do you see it the same way?
I do, and I think a lot of it, like you mentioned, is actually having the discussions and bringing the partners together. You wouldn't think that that would be difficult, but like you said, maybe check some of your to-do lists at the door,
Right.
and be able to have discussions openly. And I think that is a big help as we move forward. Like I mentioned earlier, I think sometimes business and industry wants employees now, But if they invest a little bit longer term, then they have that pipeline to move students into those careers.
I totally agree with you. You know, one of the things that it just drives me nuts when I hear employers say this, and we've all heard it, and I'll admit I was guilty of saying it before I kind of moved over to the education side and understood that side of it a little bit better, was, you know, we say, oh, we just want somebody to fog a mirror, or just I want somebody that can come to work every day and stay off drugs and take a little bit of direction. And we hear employers saying that's what we want. Well, if that's what you're telling your educators that you want, well, that's probably what you're going to get. And then you sit down and say, okay, well, what about somebody that understands basic AC/DC technology, or conveyors, or robotics, or automation, or understands lean manufacturing or standardized quality? Does that not matter? Oh, no, that would be great. Okay, what about somebody that understands IIoT and connected systems and a little bit of data analytics? Oh, that would be even better. Well, okay, that is the role of our community college. That's the role of our education space, and I think you're exactly right. I actually get in the face a little bit of employers. I'm just like, stop saying that, because that is what your educators are going to hear. And then when I hear educators repeat that back, all our companies want are people that'll show up every day, and all they want is soft skills. Well, soft skills are the starting point, but there is so much more to being successful in your career than those soft skills, right?
Definitely, yeah. And you know, I think sometimes we underestimate our students.
Right.
I know one of the big things that we're doing in Ohio and a lot of other states is work-based learning opportunities. And we don't want students to just go in there and sweep the floor in the factory.
Right.
We want them to actually have opportunities to learn and grow while they're still in school.
Absolutely. Do you have an example of a work-based learning opportunity that's been particularly successful? Comes to mind?
Well, I have a lot of them.
Yep.
Work-based learning is required for all of our CareerTech students in
Okay.
Ohio. So, you know, I think it's different in every career field. You know, you have cosmetologists maybe out on the floor learning from other cosmetologists.
Sure.
Manufacturing is going to be a lot different, auto tech. So, culinary, it just really depends on the career field. But we want those opportunities to be meaningful for students, and they need to have a training plan where they're learning specific competencies and able to, you know, complete those as part of their program.
Absolutely. You know, it was sometimes people joke about, you know, an internship, for example, being the person that makes the coffee, or makes, you know, in the days of making copies or whatever, that was the job. And I think we've seen a morph away from that, at least in a lot of cases. In some of our businesses, we employ interns, and we're always really intentional, and it's easier to do in a small business, but really intentional about what does that student want to learn. We'll even ask them, when this 6-month experience is over, what do you want to be able to put on your resume? What do you want to be able to tell a future employer that you learned while you were here? And then give them real work to do. That has value, that has deadlines, that has opportunities to report out and show us what they accomplished. It is amazing what some of these young people learn, and I think you're exactly right. It's got to be a meaningful opportunity. It can't just be going in and sweeping the floor and watching the manufacturing machines run. There has to be a valuable skill that comes out of that. So phenomenal answer and response there, Carrie. What a great show we have here at ACTE. I mean, just like we said before, it's more than 6,000 people are here walking through the floor. We're sitting across from the Amatrol booth. I know we've got the Fanuc booth right behind us. I'm looking out at this sea of technology. Have you had an opportunity to walk the floor and check some things out?
I have just a little bit today. It's been pretty busy, but you know, I think a lot of great opportunities for business and industry partners to connect with educators and show their products and how they can help students. And a lot of these opportunities we don't have, you know, maybe at home to connect with these different companies.
Right. Yeah, it's been just absolutely fascinating for me. I walked around a little bit earlier, looked at some new technology for teaching electric vehicles. That obviously is hugely emerging. Everybody's talking about that. This whole idea of the industrial Internet of Things, of Industry 4.0, folks talking about that. And I think, I've mentioned already today in a couple other episodes, historically when I thought of ACTE, I would think of manufacturing technology because that's where I came from. But you walk through here, you've got healthcare, you've got agriculture, you've got people doing really cool work-based learning projects. It really is fascinating to see the different technologies on offer and all the things you can learn just walking the floor and talking to some of the suppliers and exhibitors about the great things that they're doing. Speaking of great things, and I'm sure you've been to some presentations, maybe a keynote or so, meeting with really interesting people. Anything that comes to mind that you've learned so far this week that was particularly fascinating?
I think one of the things that I'm always reminded of when we come to these events is CareerTech is really a family. It operates differently in different states across the nation.
Right.
But we all have the same goal, and that goal is to help grow students. And I know that's not earth-shattering or
Right.
anything, but it's a big reminder when we have close to 6,000 people here, and it's our biggest attendance in 20 years,
Right.
that this is really a family of career tech professionals that are here to support each other, share things like lesson plans, work-based learning opportunities, all kinds of ideas. And so I think the networking here is invaluable.
Absolutely. One of my favorite things, and I get to do a lot of it, is now traveling all over the country and seeing really innovative approaches to career technical education. And you're right. I mean, no two regions, no two colleges for that matter, necessarily do it the same way. And this opportunity to see what other people are doing, to see what's working and what might fit in at another school, at another education institution, in another program, one of the huge values of being here at ACTE. And it is, I mean, it's a different type of attendee, if you will. And we go to our share of, school board conferences and teacher conferences and just the community here that you discuss here at ACTE, and there's this group of individuals that are so free and willing to share their best practices and share ideas with each other. It really is about taking that, to your point, all the way back to the student at the end of the day. If we're creating those learning outcomes and future pathways for our young people that we're targeting, that is what this event is all about. And it's just been really fascinating for me to meet incredibly interesting and committed people, yourself included. I know we just have a minute or two left in our half hour. It's amazing how quickly 30 minutes can go by when we're having a deep and interesting conversation. But one of the questions that I wanted to leave, or hit on before we left our time with you, Carrie, is this, and it's a question that we ask every single one of our guests here on the Tech Ed podcast. Let's say you're giving advice to a high school sophomore. You're visiting a sophomore, a high school, meeting with a group of sophomores, or one in particular. You've got an interesting viewpoint in the world of career technical education as the Tech Prep Chief Administrator of Central Ohio Technical College. If you had one piece of advice for that high school sophomore, Carrie, what would that be?
I think a lot of it is just exploring different careers. Sophomore might be a little bit late in life to do that, but I think sometimes we have to find out what we don't want to do in order to find out what we do want to do for a career. So I think exploring different careers, and then also taking a look at what that career requires for training. So instead of just looking at, I want to go here or there to college or whatever, we look at the career and then kind of see what training's needed.
Absolutely. And this is one of those things that I think young people, they dream, they think about what it is that they would want to be, when they grow up, or when they finish whatever their education pathway is. But you're right, really understanding what it is, what is it going to take in order to be able to function well and be successful in that career choice. And that really does require, when you're a sophomore in high school, understanding is what are your options. Can you go direct to workforce? Is a third-party certification something that would be valuable? Is it a tech diploma? Is it an associate degree? Is it something after community college or direct into the university? Whatever it is, understanding what is that pathway and then making it most efficient, right? So we're not getting to whatever comes after high school and then having to figure out what we should have done if we're thinking about that when we're 15 or 16 years old. So really, really good advice from Carrie Scheiderer. She is the Tech Prep Chief Administrator for Central Ohio Technical College and the ACTE Region 1 Vice President. So thank you so much for your leadership on both of those fronts. You're doing great work, Carrie. We really appreciate you joining us.